The universe expands, but not aimlessly. Beneath all motion, beneath entropy, orbit, and decay, there exists a deeper geometry, an anchor frame, unmoving against which everything else drifts. In myth, it was called Meru, the world axis. In physics, it remains unspoken because no system wants to admit it is off-center. But when an object enters a gravitational field without accelerating, when time slows around it though no mass increases, when a slingshot bends space-time instead of trajectory, then something is not moving, something is fixed, and everything else is adjusting to it. That something we later called Atlas. It started as a mild anomaly in the Jovian ephemerides, a rhythmic deviation in Callisto's orbit, too slight to notice unless you were running long-span gravitational models. One team at the Argentine Array caught it first, then another in Oman. No local cause, no mass detected, just a persistent harmonic ripple repeating every 79 hours. At first it was logged as noise, but when Saturn's ring structure showed a synchronized phase lag, some of the senior analysts took notice. 3 separate systems, all deviating subtly, and all within a narrow orbital window, still within tolerance, barely. Deep space tracking teams began correlating timestamps, a faint drift in Neptune's Lagrange points, minute shifts in solar telemetry. It wasn't enough to trigger an alert, but it was enough to raise a question no one wanted to ask. What are we moving around? And when they found Atlas, no one recognized the connection. And so, without ceremony or urgency, the solar system began to tilt, gently, imperceptibly, around something it hadn't seen and could not yet define. Then it disappeared behind the sun. Standard conjunction, nothing unusual, except for what followed. Radio silence, yes, but also a hard-to-explain latency in solar telemetry. Not a delay in data transmission. This was different. The sun's gravity well showed signs of softening. Something in the curvature of space-time around it had momentarily loosened. The infrared corona dimmed slightly. Particle dispersion patterns altered by fractions of degrees. Time-stamped signals from 2 independent probes came back out of sync by almost a full second. The sun had not emitted anything new. It had absorbed something. When Atlas emerged from the far side of the sun, its path was identical. No course change, no thermal flare. But the sun itself now bore the imprint of its passage. Something had passed through the system, not in motion, but in presence. Atlas hadn't been eclipsed. The sun had been rewritten. The headlines read, "Interstellar object slingshots past the sun." But the physicists were baffled. Atlas hadn't accelerated in the classical sense. Its speed changed, yes, but without any visible expenditure of force. No thrust, no ejection, no tail. Just a clean vector shift, as if space had reprogrammed itself midstream. A group at the ESA proposed an inverted interpretation of the Oberth effect. What if proximity to a gravity well didn't increase velocity, but instead compressed time? Atlas, immune to temporal curvature, appeared to accelerate because we were slowing down. In a classified report, one analyst wrote, "It didn't speed up. We aged." The real exchange wasn't between energy and speed. It was between time and mass. Atlas gave nothing, but we gave away a little more of the present to stay caught in its wake. The anomalies began cataloging themselves. Spin rate irregularities in deep scan imaging. Spectral lines shifted toward impossible elements. Outgassing trails with no thermodynamic cause. Isotopic decay rates, fluctuating by single-digit margins, synchronized across millions of kilometers. At first, they seemed unrelated. A cloud of cyanide, a flash of nickel, an electromagnetic pulse that registered only on old Voyager instruments. But then someone overlaid the event timelines with Atlas's approach vector and saw the pattern. Each anomaly fell precisely in line with Atlas's passage. They weren't symptoms of randomness. They were signs of correction, like a flywheel adjusting itself. Atlas wasn't doing anything, it was simply there, and that presence was enough to make the universe rebalance around it. Ari Loeb had the idea to overlay Atlas's trajectory with archival SETI data. The WOW signal, a narrowband burst from 1977, had never been explained. Its origin point was somewhere in Sagittarius. Atlas, as it happened, had come from a region not far off. The offset was about 7 degrees, too wide to be causally connected, too specific to ignore. A deeper model showed something stranger. If Earth's rotation, precession, and gravitational drift were factored out, not just in space, but in inertial reference, then the WOW signal and Atlas aligned perfectly. It wasn't a miss, it was lag. The WOW signal hadn't come from the point of origin, it had come from where the universe had been when the signal was emitted. Atlas was the real origin. The signal was the echo of a correction wave, and now, decades later, the source had arrived. The solar system doesn't orbit the sun. Not really. It orbits a center of mass that drifts, shifts, recalculates with every comet, every planet, every ounce of force. It wobbles like a gyroscope, seeking a still hand. And for a fraction of a second, during Atlas's closest pass, that wobble stopped. One gravitational harmonic, running since the Cambrian, fell quiet. Orbital precession halted for a single cycle. Pendulum clocks in deep vacuum swung true for the first time in recorded history. Astrophysicists later called it synchronization noise. But the modelers knew better. The system had found its axis. Atlas was not in our orbit. We had briefly orbited it. They pointed everything at it: radio, optical, gravitational lens arrays. Atlas absorbed attention like a black hole for meaning. But the more precisely they measured, the less they understood. It didn't emit. It didn't interact. It didn't acknowledge. And yet every act of observation brought another correction event. More anomalies, more adjustments, more coherence. That was when someone proposed the mirror hypothesis. Atlas wasn't doing anything. It was being observed. And in being observed, it became the mechanism through which the universe saw its own imbalance. The telescopes weren't instruments anymore. They were mirrors, refracting not light, but drift. By watching Atlas, we participated in the act of cosmic realignment. Entropy isn't chaos, it's motion without memory. It's the sound of a system forgetting what it once held steady. And yet after Atlas passed, something had changed. The stars still burned, the planets still turned, but the noise had lessened, slightly, subtly, as if the entire system had exhaled and found itself closer to center. Asteroids stopped tumbling at chaotic rates. Old probes, long dormant, began transmitting again, synchronized without reason. A millisecond shaved from Jupiter's orbit. A magnetic anomaly on Earth that pulsed in harmony with solar wind. Atlas never altered course, but everything else did. And somewhere in the background radiation of the universe, the echo of that correction hums, softer than noise, sharper than silence, a moment of balance. And the long return begins.